Hello. Who's out there? Say hi. Hey, Eunice. How are ya? Hey, Chris. Playing some guitar today. Hey, Kendra. It's not really a nice day out, eh? Good. It's a good morning to do a little math, I'd say. Good. We'll give a little bit of time for people to get on the whiteboards. There's a few of you on there, which is fantastic. Nice, nice. What's the latest? Did you guys have a good weekend? Anybody do anything interesting? Sarah, hi. You're all about the emojis. I love it. Start this thing up. Hey, Spencer. How are you doing? Good to see you. Let's give it a couple minutes. There's a bunch of people just jumping on the whiteboards. Those of you who just joined, hello. Excited to be back on YouTube Live. Talk to you about the last kind of chunk of algebra that we need to know. It's going to be a good time. If you're wondering why your whiteboard has something on it, it's because I have the ability to push out. So I create something on mine and I can push it to all of yours. So that's kind of what we're going to look at here in a minute. Just to give you a little head start. Nice. Yeah, we'll start at about 9:49 maybe. What's the whiteboard class name? Spencer, if you go to your Google Classroom, if you can just click on the link and it'll take you there. Otherwise, I will type in the code here. If you prefer that. One sec. E26KU. That should do it. Brady, hi. How's it going? Nice. Couple people popping in here. We're going to rock and roll soon. Mr. Archer, there you go. See? He's just as excited as I am. Perfect. Ooh, Paige. Look at you. I miss those drawings. Unreal. All right. Let's rock and roll. Some people will trickle in, but that's okay. I know your time is valuable, so I want to respect that. And let's talk about something called table of values. I switched my desk up a little bit, so it's, there we go. Now you can see me. So what we are trying to do with table of values is we're basically finishing up the algebra unit by taking an equation and being able to graph it. So in order to graph an algebraic equation, like on your whiteboards, if you're using the whiteboard app with me, it says y is equal to x plus 1. That is something called a linear equation that you're going to be able to graph. Now, in order to be able to graph it, we need to do what's called creating a table of values. So that's the goal for today. And then later this week, we're going to look at how to take a table of values and then graph it. So on your whiteboard, you have something that looks like this. It's that kind of a T-chart. And in one column, you have X, and the other column, you have Y. On top of that is the equation that we're actually going to create a table of values from. So it's always going to be in the form of Y equals, and then it'll be some sort of an equation. Now, the equation that you see here is something that you've been working with, that style. Instead of Y, you have a number, maybe X plus 1 is equal to 7, and you can solve for your Y value. In this case, you have two variables, which is a different way to see this equation, but it allows us to create a table of values and to graph something like this. So here is how you would take an equation like this, y is equal to x plus 1, and create a table of values with the goal of eventually being able to graph this linear equation. So it's going to create a line on a graph. Now, if you remember from maybe I think grade 6, grade 7, you worked with the Cartesian plane and you looked at being able to take two coordinates and plot them on a graph. So you have an x coordinate and a y coordinate. Say, for example, the coordinates were going to be 4 and 2. Well, if you had the coordinates 4, 2, you would be able to find that little spot on the graph and plot it. All right. Now, some of you maybe did the activity where you connect the dots or make a picture or do your name, something like that. That's going to come into play here, especially when we get into graphing. So in order to create a table of values, we need to take the equation that we're working with. So y is equal to x plus 1, and we're going to create ordered pairs. So ordered pairs is the x value and the y value that you'll eventually be able to graph on a Cartesian plane. So you're wondering now, where do I get my numbers from? And that's a great question. There's a couple different ways to do that. Now, one is if you're working with a question that says create a table of values, it gives you sometimes a range. It says from x values of say 0 to 5 is really common. So that's what we're going to work with now. So it's always going to give you the x values for the question. So I'm going to say this question, we are going to work from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So from 0 to 5, we are going to look at what are the y values, or what is the other ordered pair in this table of values. So on your whiteboards, and I see some of you already jump starting here, I want you to write the x value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is typically given in a question, or if you're never given that information, you can actually just start with those numbers, okay? The other common range would be -3 to +3, because then we can look at what the graph is doing in the negative side of things, and we'll take a look at that today as well. But at this point, I see that's great, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some of you actually are going ahead and filling this in, which is good. This is a simple one. So how do I figure out the y values from this equation? Well, just like our skills from algebra tell us, if we plug in our answer, and let's say, for example, 0, okay? If x is 0, we can just replace our x with 0, our original equation, and y is equal to 0 plus 1. Well, what's 0 plus 1? 1. Now, instead of x is 0, we're now going to replace x with 1. So what if you put 1 into the equation? Y is equal to 1 plus 1. Well, 1 plus 1 is 2. If I replace my x value with 2, I get 2 plus 1, which is 3. And the rule of thumb for creating x and y tables is if you have 3 y values, it's probably good enough to be able to identify a pattern. So I can look at the y values and go, oh, 1, 2, 3. What's the pattern here? It's increasing by 1. So instead of having to go back and substitute and do the math, even though this is a simple question, I can just carry on and figure out the pattern. And I can kind of skip some of the math there. And I can always double check if I'm unsure. Oh, I want to double check my last value here. 5 plus 1, does that equal 6? Absolutely. Okay, so here we have x and y values from ranging 0 to 5, and we have the corresponding y values. So this is going to be important because eventually we're going to be able to graph this. Now, the reason that this pattern is going to stay the same is because the questions that we're dealing with, these are called linear equations. They're all going to form lines right now. So at this level in grade 8, we're working with just lines on a graph. In high school, you're going to get these things called parabolas, and you get like the U-shaped, and you get some funky 8 curves things going on, but we're not going to be able to get there today. This is the simple version of creating an x and y table or a table of values. So if I'm looking at the whiteboards here on the TV, I see awesome stuff. This is pretty straightforward for this example, and all of you have awesome answers for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase, I'll erase my whiteboard and I'll put another one up there, and I'll do it also up here. So what I want you to do is try to create your own table of values. Your x range will be the same as mine, and this time we're going to use it again of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my range is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice that these numbers are just going consecutively up by 1, which helps when we're going to graph it because it kind of gives us a nice step-by-step line that we're going to see in the future. So instead of our equation y is equal to x plus 1, we are going to switch this to y is equal to 2x plus 1. Okay, so here's my new, if I asked you to create a table of values with an x range from 0 to 5, and your equation was y is equal to 2x plus 1. So on your whiteboard here, and I'll refresh mine so you can see what's going on if you prefer. Oops, I'll actually push this out to you in a second. So y is equal to, so I can give you that to start, and then you can fill in the equation, and then you're going to fill in your table of values. Now to get you started, I'll help you with the first one. If I want to figure out the y value for my first ordered pair, I need to take this x value of 0. I can pick any one if I wanted to, but I usually start at the top of the list. Put 0 into your question. Every time you see x, you replace it with 0, which means here we're going to put 0. Now, 2 times 0, remember when we have numbers squished together, it means multiplied, and anything multiplied by 0 gives us 0. 2 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 1 is 1. So to get you started here, I have an x value. If x is 0, y is equal to 1. And that's back to that input-output that you worked on in grade 6, I believe, and a little bit in grade 7 as well. So I'll rewrite the original equation, and I want to see if you guys can fill in the rest of your x, y table of values with our new equation, y is equal to 2x plus 1. So I'll give you a second to work on that. Some of you are working just on a piece of paper at home. That's great. A number of you are working up here so I can see what you are doing. Oh yeah, as soon as you find a pattern, that's great. 3 in a row, you can continue to roll with the pattern. That's great. Stay hydrated here. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Scroll down here. Good. Good. You guys are catching on super, super quick. It's awesome. Maybe about 10 more seconds. Okay, so let's go back here and let's finish this off. So if I'm looking for the ordered pair that goes with x, well, I plug in 1 wherever it says x. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Here are 3 values. All of a sudden we have this pattern. What's happening? This is going up by 2s. So 7, 9, 11. I could estimate the next one, 13, 15, 17, just keep going. And obviously once you have the pattern, it's really, really nice to be able to just kind of whip through the rest. If you're really unsure and you go, I don't know if I really trust this 3 in a row, I want to do 4 just to make sure, great strategy. If you want to double check the last one, you say, well, just to make sure, I'm going to plug in 5 to my equation. 2 times 5 is 10 plus 1 is 11. Okay, so that's a really, really good strategy. Just in case you just don't really trust your pattern, you can always plug in your values. Awesome. We're going to just step it up a little bit here. And I'm going to put a different little challenge on the board. So I will, once again, just kind of push out my whiteboard. So then you have a refreshed screen. Okay. Here is going to be a little bit of a twist. So instead of 0 to 5, okay, the range, and once again, to get the x values, you're either one, given it in the question, or you just, you need to identify where you need to graph this line or what you're looking for, and that'll help you. So the x values are kind of just saying, if x is something, what is y? So the y in this case is something that you're calculating. So this case, our range, and another common range will be from negative numbers to positive numbers to see what happens to the graph in the negative side of things. So this range is going to be from -3 to +3. And my question is going to be, let's go with 2x plus, actually 2x minus 1. Okay, so if I'm asking you to create a table of values with a range of -3 to +3 and find the ordered pairs or the table of values for the equation y is equal to 2x minus 1, this is exactly what you're going to set up. All of this information is something that you'll get from the question, and the solving piece in this style is the y value. So take your x values and plug them in. Here's a little hint. If you are struggling with negative integers and you say, I'm just getting nervous here with the negative numbers, well, if you just start here, 1, 2, 3, positive, 0, 1, 2, 3, you can find a pattern and just work backwards to find these ones as well. So if you just want to double check, because sometimes we do get a little bit confused with negatives and multiplying and adding and stuff, that's another strategy to keep things more positive. Okay, so I want to see those. Try those out on your whiteboard. And as you're developing your why values, look for patterns. Does this make sense? Do they increase or decrease by the same amount? And you might have to be, you're going to be a little bit concerned about the positives and negatives there. Nice. I see some of you actually starting at 0. That's great. Why is this great? Because if you multiply anything by 0, it's 0. So this whole thing gets taken out and we're left with -1. That's an awesome place to start. Nice. I also see some of you looking and saying, oh, I have a pattern, even if it's just 2 y values. Well, and then we do a third and it doesn't match the pattern. And then you go back and go, oh, wait, I messed this up. I got to fix this. That's great problem solving. Love to see that. Okay, about a couple seconds here, then I'll go over this one again. So if we start from the top, which is a strategy that you can use, some of you did, some of you started just with the positive numbers. It doesn't matter, whatever works for you. If I plug in -3 back into my equation, this becomes 2 times -3. A positive times a negative is a negative. So this becomes -6. Now here's an integer little equation. -6 minus 1 is going to be -7. Sometimes we get confused with that, adding and subtracting positive and negative integers. And if that's something that you're struggling with, use the positive numbers to help you get started, and then you can work backwards. If I plug in -2, 2 times -2 is -4, minus 1 is -5. You kind of have a little bit of a sense of what's happening. What's happening here, it's kind of growing by 2. Let's see if the trend continues. -1 times 2 is -2. -2 minus 1 is -3. Here's the pattern. It's growing by 2. So if you plug 0 in, it should be -1. Now, if I'm at -1 and I add 2, I'm going to get to a +1. Then +3 and +5. Okay, I can double check here. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. All right. So that is how to graph a table of, or sorry, just to create a table of values when we have a range of positive and negative numbers. And this is a really common range, -3 to +3. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do another one here, and I'll try to make it a little bit more tricky because you guys seem to be picking this up really quickly, which is awesome. So my equation is y is equal to -x minus 2, and your x range is from -3 to +3. Okay, so we're looking at this question here. And really quick, I'll push your whiteboards clean so you have a starting spot. So y is equal to -x minus 2. I'm doing this on purpose because the negatives usually is where we struggle. And if you're scared or you're unsure with the negative signs, my recommendation is start with the positive x values, and then you can work with your pattern from there. So either way, give it a shot. definitely causing you to think a little bit. That's why the pattern, recognizing the patterns is really important. If you figure out 2 or 3 of them and they're not making sense in a pattern, then you got to go back and check your work. Starting with 0, maybe that's a good strategy. A few more seconds. It's good to see you guys changing things, realizing, oh, I made a mistake, going back. I got to readjust this. That's perfect. Looking for patterns. The Y has to make sense, just like the X kind of goes up by ones. The Y's got to follow a certain pattern as well. This one's tricky. I'm seeing all sorts of numbers come up. So keep working through it. And as we talk about it here, hopefully you'll be able to get some feedback from what you've done. I'm seeing some people have good patterns, but maybe just have stumbled across the positive and negatives a little bit. Some of you are getting it. Some of you are really, really close. About 10 seconds here and I'll go over them. Okay, let's go through this. Now, I'm going to do a different strategy this time. I'm going to start with 0 and work on the positive numbers and say, hey, you know what? I'm just a little bit nervous about these negative integers, especially with a negative variable here. I'm just going to stick to the positives to help me out a little bit. Okay, so if I plug in 0 to my question, y is equal to negative x minus 2. So that would be like saying y is equal to, remember there's a little sneaky 1 in here. So it's like saying negative 1 times 0. Anything times 0 is 0. So 0 minus 2 is a starting spot here of negative 2. All right. Some of you are getting caught up with a negative 0 kind of thing. Remember, 0 is kind of that neutral number. We're just leaving it as 0. If I plug in 1, negative 1 times 1, or negative times 1, negative 1. Negative 1 minus 2 is actually going to be negative 3. 2, so a negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2. Negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. And this is an interesting one because it seems like as x is getting bigger, y is getting smaller, which is kind of crazy, but that does happen. 3, so if this is 3, we have negative 3 minus 2, which is negative 5. We can see our pattern here. Negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. We have a nice little pattern. Now, if I don't feel comfortable doing the math here, and a strategy I could use is saying, let's just follow the pattern the other direction. Negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2. Well, negative 1, 0, positive 1. Okay. Just to double check, if I plug in a negative 3 into my equation, and instead of x, I'm going to put in -3. What do we notice here? We have a negative times a negative, which is a positive. So we have +3. 3 minus 2 gives me 1. I'm ready to rock. This type of question, when we have a negative x value and we're trying to input some negative x values here, is the trickiest variation you're going to find, because we're going back to the silly double negatives, knowing how to add and subtract, multiply and divide integers. It's really, really crucial and a good foundation for you guys. So this question is really challenging. If you got that, awesome. If you were working with me as I went along, that's great too. And if you made a couple mistakes, try to go back and see where you went wrong. Okay. So that is my lesson on table of values, creating table of values. And tomorrow you're going to have a little assignment where you're actually building the table of values so you can practice and show me that you can do this. And then the day after, we're going to look at graphing. We do have a short week this week because Thursday is off and Monday is off. So you kind of have a May long weekend coming up. So we'll crunch this in. The following week, we'll wrap up the unit and we'll have a little exam. Okay, so that's kind of what's coming at you. If you have questions, just type them in the chat here or feel free to email me and I can address them really quickly right now. For those of you who are moving on with your day, thanks for tuning in once again, and look for a little assignment tomorrow morning that helps you practice this table of values. Okay, see you later. I'll stick around for a minute or two if you do have a question, and then we'll sign off. Have a great Tuesday. Woo.